Hi, Shania. So great to have you on the show, especially to have another South African because we're not in South Africa, but we're both located far away and doing the work that we do. Would you like to introduce yourself to everyone? Tell us what you do.
Sure. I'm Dr. Shania Lee. I'm a doctor of complementary alternative medicine. I've been in practice for about 20 years. I graduated in 2000, so it's exactly 20 years. No need for hard maths there. I do see patients, but because I work mostly for Nordic Laboratories practitioner support, that's kind of like my full-time job at the moment. It's an awesome position for me because I have 20 years of experience, but I also have the story of my life. So I have experience beyond the experience of working with patients that I can offer to my practitioners. So yeah, guide them to be better versions of themselves for their patients.
Yeah, that's great because I was looking for volunteers and people who have a story to tell how they've used functional medicine to get on their healing journey and live symptom free. So you put your hand up and said that you have quite a long story, so I'm dying to hear it.
Yeah, it is. I'm gonna tell it as quickly as possible, but it is long and it is a journey. So my main things that I've overcome have been chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. There are a few things in between, but my life has kind of been an up and down of being a really potent athlete to being dead in the sheets. Okay, so just to give you an example, when I was about 8, I was a champion swimmer in my town. I was like the best, faster than anybody, even 10 years older than me.
Wow.
A year later, I was in bed for 6 months of my life. It was misdiagnosed a few times. I was given multiple antibiotics, and we all know that's a bad start. Um, 6 months of that was just crazy. I couldn't even lift my arms out of the bed. And eventually my mom took me to a homeopath, and that's kind of how I got onto my own path of going complementary alternative. I believe there's a place for all medicine, but what's worked for me has always been the alternative. So that was my first bout. And then I got better and went into my next level of education, which was high school. And I was playing hockey and swimming and netball. I was doing everything, and I was doing it superbly. And next bout of fatigue hit. And I would say, if I look back on it now, there was always some kind of trigger. There was always like some kind of stressor that created it. But along with this fatigue came incredible pain. I remember struggling to walk upstairs one day, and a student came past and gently hit my ribs, and it felt like he had shattered my rib cage. That's how painful it was. And again, nobody knew what it was. I must have seen 100 doctors, and they all said it's a virus.
How
But
many
they
years
couldn't.
ago was that? Because
So I was 17 then. So
okay,
I'm not telling you how old I
yeah,
am now.
we're gonna work it out.
I was 17. It was a long time ago. It was
Yeah,
in
so
the 90s. So
before fibromyalgia was a thing, right?
yeah, it was
Or
before fibromyalgia was a thing. I mean, I had lots of injuries that precipitated it as well. So I'd injured my neck and back. So I think that the combination of, yes, being ill and having this combination of a history of injuring myself, because sports people injure themselves. That's what we do, right? Anyway, got better, of course, because there's always this ebb and flow. And in my early 20s, so it must have been about 22, I was already studying. So I was in my third year of studying, and I got hit by depression this time. And it was, I don't even know if I can call it depression. It was the darkest, dark time of my life. It was like my soul had been sucked right out of me. I couldn't find joy in anything. I did want to die. And luckily for me, we had a student clinic where student homeopaths could work on each other. Because I had gone to Joburg Jen to speak to a psychiatrist, because I was like, there's something seriously wrong with me. I need to be on medication. And he gave me a medication. I took half, and I had seriously horrendous side effects. I became homicidal, which is like, in small print, there is homicidal tendencies. And
wow.
luckily for me, did not kill anyone.
Or yourself, yeah, anybody.
Yeah, and it was just after that where the student clinic opened. So I went to see these two fifth-year students who were so excited to have a case to work on. And at this point, I'm going to be brutally honest and say that I was literally thinking, okay, well, if this doesn't work, I'm going to kill myself because I don't want to live another day like this. And they said to me, just hang on for another week, because it took them a while to get to the right remedy. And I was like, okay, whatever. And in that week, my kitten got murdered by some kids, and it was just a bad week. And like, I hung on to life by threads. I went back to the clinic, and they gave me one dose of this remedy, and it was like, it felt like euphoria had hit me. I left the clinic, and I had to walk up 7 flights of stairs to get to our diagnostics lab. And by the time I got there, I was buzzing. It was like, it felt like euphoric. And this was actually what normal feels like, I discovered eventually. This is actually what normal feels like. It was just so new and nice to feel normal again. But I had more dips and more ebbs and flows. And
what was it that they gave you, out of interest? Was it hard drugs, or was it something natural?
They gave me a homeopathic remedy called stramonium.
Yeah.
So just one dose of stramonium, and it was life-changing. But unfortunately, the dips, ebbs and flows kept on going. They were never as bad as that until so I got married in 2003. I was 27 years old, and in 2004 my husband and I decided to move to Cape Town. He left in July, and I left 1st of September. And in that time, those few months, the stress that I was under, I was working 7 days a week. I was obviously missing my new husband. The stress was a major trigger. And at this point, I was a really good mountain biker. So I was mountain biking regularly, and I just felt my energy plummet. And then when I landed in Cape Town, I said to my husband, there's something wrong with me. There's something seriously wrong with me. I can't breathe properly. I can't move properly. And you know how people sort of go, oh no, you'll be fine. You'll shake it off, whatever. And we went for a bike ride that wasn't far, it wasn't hard, but within about 100 meters, I was vomiting. I felt like I'd been put into a bear hug, and just nausea and sickness, and I was shaking, and I was cold sweats, and it was the weirdest reaction ever. And for 4 years, I suffered. I couldn't get out of bed without serious amounts of effort. I remember lying in bed and sort of being half out of the bed one day, and I just stayed there all day. And my husband came back, and he gave me this long lecture on laziness. He's not my husband anymore, okay? So and I don't blame him. I put him through hell with this illness. So but yeah, I would look in the mirror and I wouldn't recognize myself, and everything was wrong. I was having negative thoughts. My body just didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. And I was medically trained, so of course I was looking for the answer. And at this point, we only had blood tests and urine and stool, like your GP would offer. And blood tests would come back as megaloblastic anemia. Sure, that might make you tired, but it should never make you feel like you're made out of a lead suit. And again, I was getting to that point of just, I'm so tired of being alive right now. And somebody said to me, why don't you try hair analysis? And I was like, fine, whatever. What have I got to lose? I don't know what it is, but I'll do it. And I went to this guy. He was a bit of a quack, unfortunately, but he did run the test. And just a little bit of backstory. I grew up in a mining town. My school overlooked mine dumps. Now that's powdered toxic stuff that blew into the school on a day-to-day basis.
Wow.
So I got my hair analysis back, and sure, all black. It was just black lines across the sheet saying, basically I was like, wow, how did I ever walk through a metal detector? Because I was basically all metal. And also I had one of those awful dentists who was drill, bill and fill. You know, you'd go there, no problems, and he'd be like, nope, you need to. I had so many mercury fillings. So of course, great, started to do what I could to do metal detoxes. There wasn't much literature about it back then. So I made a lot of mistakes trying to get myself better, because like everybody, I had found a cause and I just wanted to get rid of it. but I did it all wrong. And I also didn't understand that there was more to me than that. But I did get a bit better. I got a bit better, not nearly as well as I wanted to be, but enough. And at that stage, functional medicine arrived in South Africa. And I went to a functional medicine lecture, and I was still tired. I was having ups and downs of fatigue throughout the day. But Danny Meyersfeld from DNA Life, he stood on the stage and he said, we now have the ability to analyze your DNA and determine certain health markers. And I was like, just take my money. I didn't have much at that point because I hadn't been working. And I threw all my money at him, and I got these results back, and I didn't understand them. You know, they were like Greek. So what happens then? You become an expert in the things you don't understand when you're in this field. So of course, became the expert. And I hadn't actually looked at my results for a while I was studying. I just kind of left them aside. And one day I pulled the results out and I stared at them, and it was like little things jumping off the page, you know, MTHFR, homozygous, GST deletion, this. And I was like, oh my goodness. Okay, well, quickly fix that. And then about a couple of years later, we had our first applied functional medicine in clinical practice event in Cape Town. And one of the things that we couldn't do as practitioners then was do all these amazing functional tests, because we could do them, but transporting from South Africa to the rest of the world was just, that expense kind of killed it. You know, it was thousands and thousands and thousands. It was just not worth it. But then Nordic arrived, and they had all of these solutions. So of course I started running tests through them. And I mean, the fatigue I haven't had in years, the depression I haven't had in years, fibromyalgia, I don't even know what that is anymore. And I was at a point where if you touched me anywhere, it was like, ow, 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 ow. I had really bad insomnia where I wouldn't sleep for weeks. I sleep great now. I have a little ring that tells me how well I sleep.
Love the Aura ring. Yeah.
Love, yep. And I did this all through functional medicine. There was a point that I was in my 4 years of looking for things. I was actually in a doctor's office, and my mitochondria were so sick with heavy metals that they couldn't actually sustain a heartbeat. And I dropped, no heartbeat, managed to get brought back. And the doctor sat me down and said, well, you need to be on beta blockers, and listed a list of drugs that I needed to be on to survive. And I wasn't going to do that. I never took those. I've only done this through lifestyle, nutrition, getting rid of the heavy metals. I don't have any metals in my face anymore. And I think anybody who does needs to take that out ASAP. There is no good metal in your mouth. And nowadays I live out in the countryside. I breathe clean air. I have air purifiers in my house. I drink filtered water. I don't care if it comes out of a tap, it's still being filtered. I eat, I mean, my food bill probably looks expensive to some people, but to me, it is medicine. And I will not, like yesterday I had a food delivery and I had bought organic mushrooms, and they said, we're just going to give you these normal mushrooms. And I was like, take those normal mushrooms away. I want the ones that are clean and healthy and aren't going to damage me. So yeah, I'm really healthy and really happy, and going for long walks in my neighborhood. I don't have those fatigue issues, don't have the pain, don't have the insomnia. I mean, there's a long list of other things that I haven't spoken about, but yeah, functional medicine for the win.
That's so great. And I loved hearing the story. And it really was a sort of a machine gun of information for a lot of people who, you know, just hearing all of those different things with DNA, depression, insomnia, that they hear all of these symptoms, right? And toxicity. And for them, everything's just is often just a singular thing, and they go after that, right? So they hang their hat onto whatever it is that symptom is, and forget to look at the whole picture, which is what functional medicine does, right?
Yeah.
So can you explain to people what steps in terms of diet and nutrition and lifestyle changes that you actually made, that, I mean, knowing what you know now, is connected to all of that you were experiencing?
So the reason I got sick was multifactorial. Okay, so as with everybody who eventually has that straw where the the back of the camel gets broken, So there was the exposure to the heavy metals, both from the mine dumps, which was probably more than anyone would experience in their normal lifetime, plus my mouth. Plus, I probably didn't eat the best diet back then. Although I was exercising, there were all these precipitating events that led up to the point where I got sick. But what I know now is that because I don't detoxify heavy metals well, I have to stay away from them. I stay away from all toxicants if I can. So no plastics are around me. I don't drink out of plastic. I don't store things in plastic. If things have been stored in plastic, they get taken out and cleaned. So there's toxin avoidance is a priority. In my story, I also suffered from mold toxicity, but that's a whole different webinar. So I keep my environment clean, but not antiseptic. So by that, I mean, like, I have my air purifiers and I keep my environment clean so that I can breathe air that isn't full of spores and things like that. Food-wise, according to my genetics, carbohydrate is pretty much a poison to me. So I'm very low carb, pretty much ketogenic all the time. That's good for me. It's not good for everybody. I was talking to a patient just before I spoke to you where she's contraindicated for this kind of thing. If she ate the way I ate, it wouldn't be good for her because it's personalized, right? And thankfully I get to do regular tests on myself and checkups on myself. So recently I've had some tests come back and I've adjusted my supplements accordingly. So doing some digestive support. I don't take a lot of supplements, but I take the ones that I need to. I like to get my food as my medicine. So I've got broccoli sprouts and I eat lots of cruciferous vegetables. I eat meat, but it's all like, I live in the countryside, so I can see my meat growing up. That's how.
And what it's eating, right?
Yeah, I can watch. I can assess it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and drinking clean. Definitely my water. I've got 2 very expensive water filters, so depending on the day, I'll use one or the other. I'm pretty obsessive about getting my sleep as well. Sleep is so important to change inflammatory responses, to get the brain detox because the lymphatics of the brain is more active at night. So I'm in bed and asleep usually by 10 every night. So I'm not one of those people who stays up for any reason. Like if I see a New Year's Day, it is literally at 7 a.m. That's my New Year's Day. Wow. And I won't even stay up for fireworks.
Yeah, wow.
So sleep, super important. Daily exercise also, because, you know, sitting is the new smoking if you sit around for too long. But most importantly, everybody has their own precipitating factors, their own triggers and their own mediators, and they can listen to my story and they can take little segments of it, but it's my story and my healing was tailor-made to me, as everybody should be. We're all so different.
Yeah, no, that's true. And it's so great that you brought up a story where because yours is one where you relied on quite a lot of labs to give you information, and there are some people who just want to see that information, especially the scientists like me, that they want to see it on black and white, what the blood says, what their DNA says. But those tests can be extremely expensive and cost prohibitive for some. So maybe you want to explain how a person, what they get out of the labs, what's the benefit of getting labs, and how can you make progress even if you don't have the cash to buy labs?
Okay, so that's fairly easy to answer. As a practitioner with many years of experience, I do make educated guesses, as does any practitioner. You know, we've read the textbooks, we've got some experience. When a person comes in and they've got a list of symptoms, there's a part of you that goes, well, I think it's this. Okay. However, something that I've learned through testing is that this can sometimes be that. Okay. They're very different. Specifically when it comes to hormones, you know, you think you know what you're doing with them, but then you look at the results and actually you were slightly off the mark. And one of the things that I've noticed is, yes, testing seems expensive, seems being the operative word, because if you guess and you guess wrong, it's going to end up being more expensive. But if you test, there's no guessing, and you can actually shorten the time of suffering, essentially, the time that it takes to heal, because you've got the right information. So I'm a test, don't guess kind of person. You know, you don't have to do lots of tests to get the answers that you need, but if you do the right ones, you get to the answers quicker and you get better quicker. And
Yeah.
I've seen that multiple times.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, because as we say, I mean, we're trying to build a piece of a puzzle.
Yep.
And we're getting bits and pieces through symptoms, through history, and lab tests results are just another piece of the puzzle that is just going to make that picture quite clear.
Absolutely.
And you can experiment without testing. It's just going to be an iterative process. It's just going to take a little bit longer, right? And yeah, that's what I tell my clients.
You could do something wrong. Like, for example, some deficiency symptoms mimic excess. So you could actually have very high levels of the thing you're deficient in, and you start to supplement it, and suddenly you've made everything a whole lot worse.
Yeah, very classically in cortisol, right? And
Cortisol,
cortisol, yeah.
and a couple of minerals. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, cortisol is something you kind of have to measure, because the symptoms of excess and deficiency are almost identical. Like, you don't know which one is which. The person is tired at both ends of the spectrum. So
they can't get out of the bed for both reasons, very high or very low. Yeah, no, that's great. So if somebody who's listening to this is wondering about how to start their journey in functional medicine, whether it really can help them, what kind of message do you have to give them?
Find a partner you can work with, because it's a journey. It's a journey. You don't go from sick to better in a straight line. You're going to need someone to partner up with. Be it in my practice, I have a coach on staff. So my patients will see me, and then my coach will take over for the majority of the part, because we need to hold their hands throughout the whole process. So if somebody is dabbling in the idea, but they haven't quite got there yet, they need to find partners they can work with. That is a priority. And there are lots of people out there, and you won't gel with everybody. You know, there are lots of good practitioners who, you know, not every patient gels with them, because we are, again, we're all different. So find a partner, listen to them, trust, do your part, eat the right food, make the right
do the homework too. Yeah.
So it's always your choice what you put into your face, right? So every time you're putting something close there, you need to eyeball it and go, is this going to help me, or is it going to hurt me? And that's,
I'd love to ask your opinion on that whole thing about implementing change, because I've had through some of my interviews that whole question about when they started implementing change, there was resistance for whatever reasons. Was there anything like that for you? And what would you say to people who are not embracing full change?
Sadly, change has to come from the mind first. You can't force somebody to change. And if they're resistant, you need to address that addiction. So unfortunately, food is an addiction in some cases. So if they're resistant to changing diet, that's a mental aspect of the case that you need to address. Or if they're just not ready, you know, maybe give them a bit of time, or send them to another member of your team. So maybe instead of working on their physical health, work on their mental health first. Get them to get to that point where any obstacle is actually worth jumping over to get better.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's the beauty of functional medicine, right? And it's not only about what you're putting into your mouth, but thoughts and mindset and that whole mind-body aspect. Yeah, that's brilliant. So would you like to just tell people how they can get in touch with you? Maybe you want to just say one thing on the whole DNA testing, because I know for so many people that's fascinating. I know Nordic is in the UK where you're sitting, Nordic's in South Africa as well. And where do they have offices elsewhere in the world?
We have 60 different countries in our books.
Okay.
But pretty much everywhere. I think the only places we don't go to at the moment are China and Russia.
Okay.
So it's a test that can be done by anyone, anywhere. It's a buccal swab, so it's a cheek swab. So it's a non-invasive test. You pretty much only have to do it once, because your DNA never changes, but how your DNA works in your body to create proteins and enzymes, that is changeable through your diet and lifestyle. And it's a great way to understand yourself, so you can have a look at what your blueprint is and create a journey for yourself that it is less damaging than maybe the one you're on. And it's not an expensive test. I mean,
the basic, it's the DNA health that is the standard, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. And that in the UK costs how much?
£199.
£199. Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
199, not £1.99.
That would be a dream.
I would just have it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, Shania. So you let them know how they can reach you, email or website, and
So my practice website is radiantbalance.co.uk. The radiant is in shiny balance.co.uk. And if you're a practitioner and you want to get hold of me, my email address is slee@nordicgroup.eu.
perfect.
Cool.
Well, it was great to hear your story and lovely to chat to you, Shania.
You too.
Wish
Thanks
you all
for
the
having me
best.
on. And I really hope that people get inspired and not creeped out by my story.
No, not at all. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.